Good morning. It's good to see everybody here this Monday morning, and we're here today as NPDM, the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, to announce the decision of the Black People's Grand Jury. I would like to introduce our chairman, Omali Yeshitela of the African People's Socialist Party, to deliver the decision.
Thank you very much. I want to express appreciation to those of you of the media who did come out. And I want to acknowledge here with me Zaki Baruti, who is the leader of the Universal African Peoples Organization, and an organization that really functioned very much as a partner with the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement that presided over this Black People's Grand Jury. We had nearly two days of testimony here and evidence presented for the Black People's Grand Jury. We had a grand jury comprised of 12 people local to St. Louis County. We had 4 prosecutors, one of whom practices law in the United Kingdom and in Bahamas, another licensed to practice law in Washington, D.C., that area. And in addition to those persons who, Alex Morley and Aaron O'Neill, respectively, Zaki Baruti and I, Omali Yeshitela, chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, also functioned as prosecutors. We were not able to secure the actual presence of Darren Wilson, who was served the subpoena, asked to be here, especially since he seemed to be so eager to testify before a grand jury. We were not able to get the presence either of Robert McCullough, who presided over the St. Louis County grand jury process, something that we thought to be extremely important because we saw the Black People's Grand Jury not only as something that would look at the evidence relating to the actions of Darren Wilson on August 9th, 2014. But the Black People's Grand Jury we saw actually as a criticism of the grand jury that had occurred under the auspices of St. Louis County and Robert McCullough. So we felt like it was going to be extremely important for him to be here. In the absence of both Robert McCullough and Darren Wilson, we were able to show to the grand jury and to the audience that was here and live streamed throughout the world in a very transparent process, video testimony. We were able to present audio evidence from Robert McCullough talking about how he did knowingly allow persons that he knew to be lying testify on behalf of Darren Wilson, someone who he knew had actually participated as a fundraiser for Darren Wilson, in serious violation of ethical violations of his profession. So it was important we thought, to have the grand jury listen to that testimony, which suggested that the entire process was tainted from its inception. We also thought it was important for Robert McCullough to be present so that he could explain to the grand jury why there was a grand jury in the first place when he had it within his own capacity legally to use a preliminary hearing that would have allowed serious cross-examination of Darren Wilson and all witnesses and an examination of all evidence that was presented, and to do so in a transparent and open fashion. We thought that it was extraordinarily suggestive that Robert McCullough would instead use this private process and behind closed doors, and then would inundate the people who were supposed to be a part of a grand jury with more than 5,000 pages of testimony in a process which by law is only for the purpose of presenting the evidence necessary by law for an indictment. Of course, that's to show probable cause for an indictment. Robert McCullough chose not to do that. We had also with us the transcripts from the process that occurred under the leadership of Robert McCullough that showed clearly that the prosecutor's function in that grand jury, more than anything else, was to provide an explanation that would exonerate Darren Wilson for the execution on August 9th of 18-year-old Mike Brown. We also presented video testimony from Darren Johnson, who was someone with Mike Brown when he was killed by Darren Wilson on August 9th. We were not able to assess Darren Johnson in person. And after looking at the transcripts of how he was treated at the grand jury under the leadership of Robert McCullough, it is clear to us why it would be difficult and why he would be hesitant to step before a grand jury when it is extraordinary that the transcripts show that Darren Johnson, who was a witness to a murder, was treated as a criminal, and the person who actually executed Mike Brown was treated with kid gloves before that grand jury. We had testimony also, video testimony, from Cyril West, who is a forensic pathologist, who offered an explanation that challenged everything that Darren Wilson, Bob McCullough, and many people, especially in national media, suggested was a reasonable explanation for why Mike Brown, 6'4", was shot in the top of his head. The notion, of course, that after having been wounded by Darren Wilson and concerned enough to run away, would turn around unarmed and then would chase or would attempt to tackle an armed Darren Wilson that had already demonstrated his willingness to shoot him. And so we presented that testimony. We presented video testimony from other forces, a woman who sat in her car and watched him executed and who participated before the grand jury of Bob McCullough, a man who watched from his window and saw the execution, all of them corroborating the testimony by Darren Johnson about how Mike Brown was killed. Now, this is some of the evidence that we presented before the grand jury. But in addition to that, we felt it was absolutely necessary to show that there is a pattern of behavior by police in this county toward African people, to show that there is an historical relationship that does exist in this county toward African people. We had testimony from the parents of Vonderette Myers, who talked about how their child was killed. We had testimony from the parents of Carrie Ball, another victim of police murder in this county, who talked about what happened with them. We had a man to come forward and testify about how in the middle of a domestic dispute, the police would arrive, and rather than treat him civilly and even question him, would have dogs put on him, injure him while they watched the dogs do that. This man happened to have been a Vietnam veteran who had served this country and who thought that he understood how to work with the police in a very respectable way. This is some of the testimony that we had. It was a very serious and historic process, I must say. And it was very clear that the grand jurors took their responsibility seriously as well. We could tell that by some of the questions that were asked by the grand jury before they went to begin their deliberations. And that included the question of whether or not there could be other charges. Interestingly, on at least one occasion, whether a lesser charge would be something that would be permissible. We called on the grand jury to understand that the charges that were put forward, the possible charges, were first and second degree murder. And that the reason for this is that they had a responsibility, and we had a responsibility in this instance to apply law to the facts of the case. And we were convinced that the facts of the case clearly demonstrated that Darren Wilson had an opportunity to choose differently, but instead chose to execute 18-year-old Mike Brown, and did so. This was the charge that we gave to the grand jury. There was, the grand jury then retired to deliberate, and to do so out of the presence of the prosecutors. So it was their own deliberation that took place. And they came back within an hour to bring forth their verdict. And it was the verdict of this grand jury, this historic Black People's grand jury, that was here to make a statement to the world that we are not helpless in the face of decisions made by people that would victimize us, that would make mothers responsible for burying their children as teenagers. We were not helpless. And so this grand jury, taking its charge very seriously, came back with the determination that Darren Wilson must be indicted for first-degree murder. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Sir, could you spell your name for us, please?
My first name is spelled O-M-A-L-I, Omali. My last name is Y-E-S-H-I-T-E-L-A, Yeshitela.
Thank you.
I think one of the grand jurors is with us as well. In the event there is any need to discuss the deliberations, something I have not done. And I don't know if Zaki Baruti wanted to make any statements.
Well, the only statement that I can make is, first of all, salute Brother Omali Yeshitela as the lead prosecutor with the importance of this Black People's Grand Jury being very historic, being a statement that we as a people must become self-determinant, and we cannot allow those outside of our community to determine what we deem as necessary steps for justice. So it's in that spirit that our organization proudly stood with this process. As he mentioned, it was very transparent. It was very transparent in terms of the grand jury. Members were able to ask a number of questions of the people who gave testimony, as well as we opened it up for the public. So it set a precedent It set a precedent in terms of if there is to be justice here in this country, then there needs to be a total different approach to incidents, especially racial incidents, in which the accused many times are white police officers who so many times in this country are set free and through legal loopholes. It sets a precedent that if there are to be grand juries outside of our community, minimally, grand juries are to be of equal numbers of black and whites participating, if there are to be a need for a grand jury. But as my brother pointed out, Bob McCullough didn't even need that process. He just set the stage to project the mockery of what happened several months, with his decision that Darren Wilson was not to be indicted.
Well, so you were the lead prosecutor on this?
I was.
Okay. Can I ask you, what's the message that you want sent? Obviously, this decision holds no legal bearing here, but I mean, what's the message to come out of this? Why is this significant in your mind?
Well, the first thing I want to say is this. Slavery was legal. The question for us is not whether an oppressor's law is legal or not. The question of whether it is oppressive. The message, more than anything, was to black people, African people in this country, who are victimized by police terror and murder throughout this country. If it were simply a case of one individual having been killed on August 9th, the community in Ferguson would not have rebelled the way it did. It could have been passed off as an accident. It could have been passed off as a possible just shooting, but that wasn't the case. And we also saw that immediately after that, Von Derek Myers over on Shaw was gunned down, shot 8 times, 7 of which were in the back. We saw in July, before that, the public execution of Eric Garner, choked to death. And I'm not even sure the choking was the worst part of the crime. Anybody who saw what happened, the inhumane way that he was treated, with his head by police being pushed through the pavement. There's something that's happening in this country and has been happening for a long time. For the duration of our presence in this country as black people, we've been struggling to try and end the oppression of our people, starting with trying to rid ourselves of a process of having been kidnapped and forced labor that built the economy of this country. It's this forced labor, this economy, upon which the legal foundation of America rests. So when we say it has no legal bearings, actually Nat Turner, who led a rebellion to kill slave masters and overturn slavery, was brought to court, was tried, convicted, called guilty. He made the statement then, I don't feel guilty. I don't think he was guilty either. He was guilty of a crime because slavery was legal. So to say that this has no legal bearing, I think is to misunderstand what this is about.
Yeah, let me rephrase it. What's significant about it then?
What's significant about it, as Brother Zaki Baruti just mentioned, it is a step in the direction of self-determination. It is something that's being done in the face of demonstrations, protests happening around this country around police violence. Many times, this is protest that doesn't seem to have direction. Many times it doesn't seem to be aimed toward any end. What this process we've engaged in says is there must be an end, and that end is self-determination. That black people must take control of our lives. We cannot trust our children, the future of our community, in the hands of this establishment that has proved to us over and over again its disregard for black life. So it is a step towards self-determination. to have 2 courts have occurred, 2 hearings, 2 grand juries. We heard more or less the same evidence. We applied here, however, the law. Grand juries are not trials. Bob McCullough's inundation of the people with 5,000 pages of testimony violated every principle of what a grand jury is about that's ever applied any place in this country. Grand juries are for the purpose simply of getting the evidence and information that would inform a determination of whether an indictment should happen, and that is simply probable cause that a crime has been committed. Bob McCullough himself, and I heard him say it, and that testimony was provided for the grand jury, that the testimony of Darren Johnson alone was enough for an indictment. He chose not to do that. Instead, he chose to bring witness number 40, who he said he knew was lying, who testified over 2 days in defense of Darren Wilson, I guess taking a break from her fundraising efforts that rewarded Darren Wilson for the execution of Mike Brown. This was a black people's grand jury. That was an extraordinarily serious event. We hid nothing from anybody. Anybody in the world who wanted to see what happened and whether it was a just proceeding had an opportunity to do that. They could walk through these doors and have a seat in the auditorium. They could watch it online from any place in the world, which is not something that Bob McCullough and St. Louis County can say about what they did with the case of Darren Wilson and Mike Brown.
That's right.
What is your reaction to the lawsuit that was filed against Bob McCullough by one of the grand jurors?
Well, can you say more about the lawsuit that was filed?
Not familiar with that.
No.
You're not familiar?
No.
He was saying, a story came out today that the grand juror is saying that he mischaracterized the case. Yep.
Well, that's what we said. He mischaracterized the case. We are happy that the grand jury appears to be catching up, right? and I don't know what is meant by he mischaracterized the case, when, or anything like that. I think what really I want to say, and what the point that we're trying to make, we hope that everybody comes to the correct conclusions about what happened here. Again, this is a very transparent process that we're involved in. And we do believe that the announcement that this grand jury was going to occur set the stage for people to discover witness number 40. Set the stage for a grand juror, in retrospect, to determine that he did the wrong thing. And if nothing else, it seems to me, that alone says something about the significance of this process here. Given an opportunity to do what they want to do without any kind of confrontation by the people with truth, then the lie will prevail forever. The reason we are having this discussion now is because black people step forward and say we will take our future in our own hands. We will listen to this testimony. We will bring witnesses forward. And then we will come to a conclusion that is just and transparent. That's why we can hear about witness 40, and we can hear other things about grand jurors having discovered that Mr. McCullough misstated the case.
And if I may also add, out of this grand jury, it's ironic that you would see, in terms of so-called witnesses for Darren Wilson, being only juror 40, whereas all the other witnesses were from the community, yet he is found not guilty or no probable cause for an indictment. That speaks to the mockery of the grand jury in the first place. And also that speaks to the deep racial divide, not only here in St. Louis, but throughout the country. When you have a jury that was composed of 12, 9 being white and 3 being black, and we don't know how they voted along those lines inside of the jury anyway. So again, that speaks to the deeper issues that is not only evident with the murder of Mike Brown, but as he just mentioned, Eric Gardner, Tamar Rice, and so on, that has occurred day after day, year after year in our communities, when you find police officers who act as if they are members of the KKK, which of course was sanctioned lynchings, but we say today it's legal lynching that occurs with the killing of black people, and that must stop. And this is the great process by which we feel will be a way to move forward into the future.
I would like to make just one other statement, because I can't say how anybody else understands this process of the grand jury. I think we're so accustomed in this country to rigged processes that there may be an assumption that something was rigged about this. But I can tell you that the prosecutors waited with bated breath to coin a phrase to see what the determination of this grand jury would be. And as I understand it, of the 12, that there were 11 for the first degree murder conviction, rather indictment, and one that had another position on that. So it wasn't some slam dunk thing, and it wasn't some blind group of people, but it was a group of people who took their responsibilities very seriously and who had before them every inch of the way the law as it is written, as it is characterized for this county and this country. So this was the prevailing thing that occurred throughout this process. And I wanted to make that statement, and I think one of the grand jurors is here. I don't know if you want to say anything about your deliberations or anything like that. Yeah. Yeah. Were you the lead?
I was the foreman.
Foreman, yeah. Go ahead. Say your name. So.
My name is Robert Dillard. And I was the foreman and juror number 1. And it was a difficult process, because for us, for all of us, none of us wanted to be part of the problem. None of us wanted to be, part of a system that we were protesting. We didn't want to go in extremely biased. We didn't want to go in making a decision just because we were black, and nor was that the message that we wanted to send to the world. So we reviewed hours of testimony. We watched videos after videos and listened to witnesses, and it was difficult. And there were many heated moments in the room. So this wasn't a situation where we all came out to immediately seek a conviction for, or seek a indictment for Darren Wilson. But everyone, one thing I can say, everyone that was in the room, we looked very carefully at all of the evidence that was presented to us. And as been said before, there was a lot of focus on making sure that we were paying attention to the facts and that we weren't letting our emotional biases, come into play. So yeah, it was a difficult process.
Question. The St. Louis County Grand Jury heard testimony and deliberated over the course of 3 months or so. How were you able to pack that into 2 days, including your deliberations and everything? Do you feel like you made your way through everything?
I'd like to speak to that if I may, because it's a legal question. There's an assumption that McCullough and much of the national media promotes that the responsibility of the grand jury was to hear all of this testimony. It was like to inundate the people with testimony. That's not the case. McCullough himself stated that all he needed was to show probable cause, and Doran Johnson's testimony alone was enough to show probable cause. And that's what grand jurors do. So we didn't have 5,000 pages of testimony. There was no witness number 40 who spent 2 hours there. None of that occurred. We presented the evidence necessary for a reasonable, prudent group to make a determination. And I think the law does speak to a prudent person being able to make a determination that there was probable cause, that a crime had been committed. So there was not 5,000 pages of inundation. that was not the case. We didn't try to overwhelm a group of people with inertia. Minutia, right. Well, inertia. That wasn't the objective at all. So that's why McCullough could have done it in the same fashion. He could have acted legally, principally, and ethically, and he didn't. He refused to do that because he knew what the outcome was that he wanted. And it didn't, and everybody knows that a grand jury is a prosecutor's tool. Of 160,000 federal grand jurors, and we know that there's a difference in a federal grand jury and state grand jury, of 160,000 in 2010, only 7 instances were there no indictments. Only 7. So it is a grand juror's tool. You know about the proverbial ham sandwich. Well, this was no ham sandwich that we had before us. This was an actual process that was transparent again and legal.
So basically you're saying the bottom line is you think McCullough stacked that case?
I'm not saying I think he stacked the case. I'm saying I know he stacked the case. Right. And I'm saying also that if you look at the testimony, first of all, I think it's incumbent upon all of us media people to find out what a grand jury is about. Because most people don't know what a grand jury is about, and they accept what McCullough is talking about as gospel. He is being democratic. That's what he's saying. This is a democratic process, letting people hear everything. When the hell has a prosecutor ever done that in a grand jury? That's not his responsibility to let them hear everything. He should have been there to present evidence that a prudent person would be able to make a determination that a crime had been committed. And he didn't do that.
Bob, I think.
Yes. I have a copy of the Riverfront Times, which is one of the popular magazines here that comes out. It's for the December the 25th, the 31st, 2014 edition. They have a picture of witness number 40 here, Samuel Elroy. The first interview that McCullough gave after the Michael Brown verdict, it stated the interview that he would not seek perjury charges against witness 40 or any other witnesses who offered discredited testimony. What do you think of that?
I think that first of all, it was a discredited process.
Yes.
That, you know, to assume that somehow that the witness, that McElroy, would have done something differently in the process that McCullough stacked. And I want to just say that what's really important for everybody who's seen this and heard about this, it wasn't that he did not know she was a liar. It wasn't that. He said it. He said he knew she was lying. He knew it. And he put that evidence before that grand jury. He knew it. He stated that himself. And I think that's enough for serious charges against McCullough, that he should be removed. He should be disbarred because that's a serious ethical breach in terms of his responsibility as a lawyer. He knew that. And that did not happen with us on the 3rd and 4th. In the short period of duration that we engaged in, there was no witness number 40. There was no participation with anybody. And when those 12 people went to deliberate, I was on pins and needles wondering what kind of determination they would come back with. And one of the reasons I was because of the questions that were being asked of prosecutors by the grand jurors themselves. It was an open process, and I'm proud of it. It was a historic process, and I'm proud of the grand jurors, and I'm proud of this community, and I think that it's been an incredible historic moment that we will see replicated throughout this country by black people who want to be free and do not want to live in communities where we have to expect that our children will die early deaths because of police actions.
Robert, can I ask you, Robert, what? Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I think
okay, can you address the black people who say they don't see the point of this black people's grand jury?
Yeah, I suspect if you ask them about the point of the white people's grand jury. If they're honest, they would come to a similar conclusion. But I don't expect that everybody will understand, nor that everybody will unite. What was important for us was the stance of those 12 people who went and deliberated around this case. And these were school teachers, social workers, contractors, painters, writers, just a variety of community activists, one variety of folk who only had the interests of this community at heart. And who never, generally speaking, we never have an opportunity to vote on our own fate. In this instance, those people did that. And the persons who don't see the significance of it or the need for it, I cannot say too much about that. I don't have an answer for that.
You know, on a historical perspective, during the height of the civil rights movement, with Dr. King leading many different marches, there were a number of folks out of our community that did not agree with him. So there's never complete unity in terms of different kinds of movement. We recognize the historic moment. We are the pioneers, because they always pioneer movements to bring about a substantive change, and this is what this is all about.
I guess if I responded to them, I would say, you're going to be free whether you want it or not. I'm sorry, sir.
We asked Robert, you know, what did you take away from the evidence that you heard?
What did I take away from it?
Yeah, what did this tell you?
Well, it showed me, you know, I had, like, as has been said before, I didn't go into this wanting to be the juror for the actual trial. That wasn't my place. My place was to decide if there was, again, probable cause. So what I took away from this is that there was probable cause. And that while I don't know all of the facts, and what we do know is that there was sufficient testimony to support that there should at least be a trial, where at that point, all of the facts should come out. And I think it's kind of interesting, because I think one thing that's commonly forgotten is that the indictment is not to say whether or not this gentleman was guilty. And it's only fair to Darren Wilson as well to have his fair day in court. So what was most important to me was that everyone had a fair day in court. Not only the victims in this particular case, but Darren Wilson as well. And that's what I personally was invested in, saying that everyone had a fair day in court.
So it was 11-1 to indict for first degree?
Yes.
What was the one?
It wasn't, well, I won't say exact, because that juror isn't here, and I don't want to talk too much about that, but what I can say is this. I will say that the one really wanted there to be, some sort of representation for, you know, I don't want to put words in his mouth, you know, I really don't want to go too deep into that, but I can say that it was a very contentious debate in the room, and like my brother said before, this was not a slam dunk, and I'm just happy that we all came to a conclusion, you know, the 11 of us, that there was probable cause for an indictment.
Did he go for or against the indictment?
He was for an indictment, yes.
But a lesser charge?
Yes.
So I have a question for you. You've been out kind of on the front lines with a lot of the protests and the movement. It seems like kind of the violence and some of the protests have died down in the last week and a half or so. What impact, if any, do you see this decision having on them and the peace within the community?
This is an ongoing effort to bring justice. You may not have seen, the consistency of the demonstrations, but again, they have been there, and there's been a number of demonstrations over the holidays. This is not going away. The wound is real deep. As mentioned earlier, there have been a number of other shootings subsequently after the killing of Mike Brown. So this community is far from being united per how people try to project it. We are determined to deal with the underlying issues that impact our community, and that is police terrorism. That is the disproportionate number of white officers in our community. It is in terms of how those same white officers view our communities. Those are the deeper issues, along with the judicial system that allows the many instances of brutality. And also at our grand jury, we gave a historical background all the way back to Marilyn Banks, a young of terrorism in our community, and many instances of our people being victimized by the police. So this is far from ended. In fact, if it's not out of character right at this moment, there's going to be a major march on Clayton that Leadership for Justice Coalition will be hosting on January the 31st. So no, this has not ended, and it will continue in terms of the fight for justice.
I want to say just a couple of other things, and I want to express appreciation to all of you for being here and for your patience. But as it has been said, we see the Black People's Grand Jury as offering some kind of direction for a spontaneous movement that has seen a rapid radicalization of African people throughout this country. In fact, it is the most political motion by ordinary Black people that we've seen for the last 2 generations, subsequent to the assassinations of King and Malcolm X, the destruction of the Black Panther Party and many other organizations that existed in this country. And we've seen this rapid radicalization, but not necessarily a kind of political clarity and direction. We think that the Black People's Grand Jury offers some direction. It says that we have to have self-determination. We have to be in charge of our own affairs. Beyond that, subsequent to the decision made by the heroic jurors, we had further discussion with the audience after the proceeding was over. And we talked about the absolute need for this movement to move toward Black community control of the police. That if there are going to be police in our community, if there are going to be people in our community sanctioned by law to be able to kill, then they should be under the leadership, they should be under the control of the community itself. We say they should live in the community, that they should have the same stakes in the community as everyone else. They should not be an invading force that comes to this community only looking for trouble that they call crime. That they should assume concern for all the contradictions, not just what they call crime, but for the joblessness, for the unemployment, for the poor health, that they should be actual servants of the people, that they should have these things removed, this war gear that they wear, the black outfits and ski masks that are used to intimidate a population, to treat our community as a colonial, colonized, subject people that have to be victimized by these colonial outsiders who function as terrorists. That the people must control the police. That is a democratic response. There's some suggestion that there is a quandary about how we can solve this problem. Should we have cameras? Should there be dialogue around race around the country? Should there be what they call police review boards, giving us an opportunity to review what the police has already done? We say no, that there should be black community control of the police. That has to be the message. We train them, we hire them, we fire them, we determine their mission, the policies in our communities. And that is a democratic response. The people have the right to control the guns in their community. So that I've heard, I've never seen it, but I've heard that in white communities, police are helpful in taking cats out of trees and helping the little ladies across the street. We'd like to see something like that in our community as well. And we believe that black community control of the police will allow for there to be a police organization that the people feel secure with, that we see is there to provide for the people instead of acting as some kind of terrorist entity that comes in to occupy our community at will and then go someplace else to live without any kind of consequences or responsibility to the community. I want to, we can, just one, and then we'll close it down. Yes.
Okay, under the American legal system, do you feel that Darren Wilson had legal process under the colored grand jury, also up under the black people grand jury?
Do I, which, I'm sorry?
His due process.
Under the American legal system, do we feel
that he received under Bob McCullough grand jury and also up under the black?
I think, as the young brother grand juror said, in many ways, you could say that Darren Wilson was done a disservice by Bob McCullough, because everybody I know thinks he did it. And the way to have found out for sure whether he did it was to have gone to trial. An indictment would have taken him to trial. All the evidence could have been weighed in a very public, transparent process, and he could have defended himself in a good way. But this tainted thing that McCullough did, then there's no matter the fact that he was rewarded by the white population with, I understand, perhaps up to $1 million, so this golden parachute retirement, they call it resignation, but it's clearly a retirement. Despite the fact that he's been rewarded for that, he's going to live for as long as he does, just like Zimmerman, George Zimmerman. Everybody knows he murdered Trayvon. He's going to have to live with that. And with the fact that the whole world knows that he's a murderer. And, but he could have had an opportunity. He could have walked into this door. He could have sat down before this black people's grand jury. And he could have said, this is what happened. And people would have had an opportunity to actually ask him questions. He was not even questioned in a serious way in the white people's grand jury. I want to thank everybody so much for coming out, and turn it back over to Sister Kenisia from St. Louis International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes, again, thank you so much for the press coming out and members of the community coming out, and for this historical presentation of the decision of the Black People's Grand Jury. I would like to extend to anyone interested in joining us in this struggle to be able to contact the International People Democratic Uhuru Movement local branch membership at uhuruferguson@gmail.com, or you can give us a call at 314-643-6519. Thank you.
Thank you very much.